We've got 3 quarterbacks on the list: Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, and Anthony Richardson. So Deshaun Watson was a Heath submission. Murray was a Jamie submission. Richardson was from Heath as well. But do you share the opinion on all 3? The 2 of you, do you think all 3, Deshaun Watson, Kyler Murray, and Anthony Richardson, are difficult to rank?
Yeah, to a certain extent. I mean, I don't really have any concerns about where I have Richardson ranked, but it's not easy. So yeah.
Yeah, I think all 3 of them. I think I might have all 3 of them back to back to back. I think they're very difficult to rank. I think they all have enormous upside and very, very little floor.
You think Watson has a very low floor based on last year?
Yes.
Jamie, do you agree with that? Deshaun Watson has a low floor?
Yeah, I think you got to say that. You know, I think it's going to be a very good Browns team, especially with what they just did defensively. So their defense, I think, is in a pretty good spot. I think the run game is still going to be excellent. And I like what they've done to put pieces around, Watson by, acquiring Elijah Moore and drafting of Cedric Tillman. I think those are great offseason additions to Amari Cooper and David Njoku, along with, Donovan Peoples-Jones and even David Bell. I think they have a very deep receiving core. So I still think Kevin Stefanski's mantra, though, wants to be to run the ball. And so, is Watson, despite the contract and despite his abilities, is he going to ever return to that type of player? I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, he was obviously pretty terrible last year, but I mean, wasn't it so obvious the reason why? This guy was a top 6 quarterback per game 3 straight seasons before, 2018, 19, and 2020. He didn't play in 2021. Of course he was going to be bad last year. I mean, I shouldn't say that because I thought he'd come back and be good, but seems like a pretty logical explanation.
No, I think it does completely. There is a little bit of, it's now been 3 years since he was awesome. And until he still has to prove it again.
Who's the highest floor of those 3 quarterbacks? Watson, Kyler, Anthony Richardson.
Watson, because he's the only one that's going to start 17 games if he's healthy.
I would say a healthy Kyler Murray, but you can't say a healthy Kyler Murray. So,
okay, who has the most upside?
Richardson.
I think it's Richardson.
So you say Richardson, right? But is that because you don't expect Kyler to be able to do everything he's done because he's coming off an ACL?
I think Watson has a higher ceiling than Kyler.
I would agree. I think, look, Kyler has to prove that he's healthy and can stay healthy. He has to still deal with the potential of losing DeAndre Hopkins, and it may not be at the start of the season. It could be a trade deadline move. That's still a possibility you have to consider. And so, Heath has some concerns about the Tampa Bay offense. I think Arizona could be terrible. They may be the worst team in the NFL. And I've said this, if I'm Arizona and Kyler is not right at camp and is put on the pup list and they feel he's not right, why play him?
Right, but I asked you about upside. You're just talking about downside right now.
No, but what I'm saying is those are all the things that are weighing Kyler down. So I just don't see the same upside like I do with Richardson. And Heath is right. He's not guaranteed to play, 16 games or 17 games. We're going to get all that coach speak, just like Frank Reich is saying that, Andy Dalton's going to go into camp as QB1. By the way, Bryce Young looks so small behind that offensive line. If you've seen pictures, my goodness. So, we're going to probably hear, Gardner Minshew's doing X, Y, and Z, and, Anthony Richardson's got to prove it. All those things makes sense. But I think, they're going to do everything possible to make sure he's a starter from week 1. So I just think he has much more upside than Kyler at this point. And I think if he hits, he's got more upside than Watson.
Okay, well, you know me. I'll play devil's advocate because Kyler, I think if you're talking about upside, there's different ways to go with upside.
Will he run as much anymore?
That's the question, right? So if you're just kind of assuming that he's going to be fine, that he's going to be able to run as much, give you about 600 rushing yards, 550, something like that. He had a season where he had like 900 rushing yards. He ran a lot that year. Let's say he's in this 550, 600 range. So that's a little bit more than Watson. Watson's usually in the 480-ish range per 17 games. Richardson will blow that away for sure. But Kyler, at least I can tell you this. Kyler, before he hurt his shoulder in 2020, was the number 1 quarterback in fantasy. In the 9 games that he played with DeAndre Hopkins in 2021, he was, basically the number 1 quarterback. Maybe he was something like number 3 per game. That's more upside than we've really seen from Deshaun Watson, other than Watson's rookie year when he was on an unrealistic pace. So Kyler has shown the most upside. He's been the best quarterback in fantasy, when circumstances have been right. So that's the case that Kyler Murray has the most upside because he's shown it. I can't say that Richardson has more upside than those guys, especially Watson, because we don't have injury concerns with Watson.
I don't think that there's and upside is a weird term because you could mean 99th percentile or 80th percentile in terms of what's a reasonable upside. I don't think it's reasonable to expect Kyler to run anything like he did last year in his first year back. He might in next year, he might by the end of this year. But we're talking about running backs not being all the way back. Running's not even a requirement of his position. He might just play a little bit more in the pocket this year.
Yeah, there's a lot not to like. We have no idea what the offense is going to look like. Cliff Kingsbury ran a ton of plays. He was always one of the fastest paces and ton of plays. And but Kyler certainly benefited.
They have a first-time play caller. Who's calling plays for Arizona? I forgot.
I don't know.
I'll check.
Yeah. Let's talk about Richardson and compare him to some other rookie quarterbacks who are kind of like him. Cam Newton was a top 5 quarterback as a rookie, both overall and per game. Jalen Hurts only started and finished 3 games. He scored about 21 points in 2 of the 3 games and about 40 points in 1 of the 3 games. And it was awful in week 17 when he played 3 quarters. But he was really good, I guess, on a points per game basis in 3 games. Lamar Jackson was interesting. He barely threw. He ran a ton. This is a split you just don't usually see. You look at his points per game in 9 starts, Lamar Jackson, as a rookie. Number 9 per game in 4-point per passing touchdown leagues. Number 18 per game in 6-point per passing touchdown leagues. Michael Vick
started 9 games that year?
Yeah. Maybe it was 7. I think it was 9, though. Michael Vick started only 2 games.
Did he get considered a starter in games that Flacco also started at a different position?
I don't think so.
I was thinking 7 sounded right. I'm looking.
Yeah, 9 seems high.
I may have said the wrong number, but I did the math and all that. But Justin Fields was really
7's correct.
7. Okay, sorry about that. Justin Fields was bad. He was, he started much of the year and he just wasn't good for fantasy. Yeah. So, do you view him differently? Do you view Richardson differently as those guys, or should we use them as models and say there's a wide range of outcomes?
There's definitely a wide range of outcomes. I mean, look, he's going to definitely make plays with his legs. He's shown that ability already in college, and I think that's easy to translate to the NFL, especially with the coach that he's going to have. A guy that just worked with Jalen Hurts. Obviously, the strides that he has to make have to come as a passer. And does he have enough weapons, and does he get enough opportunities to do that? Look, they have one of the best running backs in the game, and hopefully an improved offensive line or a better offensive line than what we saw last year. And so if the run game is working and he's making plays with his legs, I would imagine it's going to be a very conservative offense. But they're still going to have to throw the ball. And if he can get to, we say this a lot, if he can get to north of 2,500 yards, I think you should feel pretty good about where his fantasy production will be if the rushing comes along with it. If he gets anywhere close to 3,000 passing yards and can still have that rushing production, then he will be close to what the upside is, I think, that we're looking at here. So, again, Daniel Jones, 3,200 and 700 in terms of passing and rushing. Justin Fields, 2,200 and 1,000. So I think that's kind of the benchmark you should be looking at in terms of where his ceiling could sort of come into play. So that's, again, a matter of how many games he'll start. Hopefully he gets the majority of those starts and plays that level. Drew Petzing is the offensive coordinator in Arizona. He was the quarterback's coach in Cleveland the past 3 seasons.
So, yeah, I would expect them to be much lower number of plays if it's the way things generally go when you make that sort of transition. And looking back at Lamar, like to those numbers Jamie was giving, those final 7 games, Lamar's 17-game pace was 2,700 yards passing and 1,350 yards rushing.
Right. It really comes down to touchdowns, interceptions, fumbles actually are a big deal because, that actually seems realistic. 1,300 rushing yards might be a lot.
And
but
I think the reason Lamar was, like you said, the difference was so great. He had a touchdown rate in those games below 3%, a passing touchdown rate below 3%. In his MVP year, I think it was 7%. For his career, it's 5 or 6%. Now, rookies are often a little low in that. They struggle in the red zone when the coverage gets tighter. So maybe that might be the difference between whether he's a top 10 QB or a top 5.
all right, so how do you guys rank these three right now?
Richardson, Watson, and they're close. I think I have Dak in between the two of them. And then big space between Kyler. For me, Kyler and Heath, I'll let you give your rank. You want to give your ranking? Go ahead before I.
No, I've got it Watson back to back to back. They're 11, 12, and 13 for me. Watson, Murray, Richardson. But
So it's interesting you have Kyler 13. For me, like I always try to look at quarterback and say, okay, I'm drafting for upside because there's so many fallback options, but I just don't know when he's going to play.
Yep.
So I have him, behind Cousins, behind Rodgers, behind Daniel Jones, guys, Geno Smith, guys that I feel pretty good about as number 2 quarterbacks, in terms of either, based on their passing production or hopefully, sustained passing production like Geno Smith. If you draft a surefire number 1 quarterback, especially if you go early and you continue to get to a point where Kyler just continues to fall, he's the perfect guy to draft, because if he does hit and somebody needs a quarterback in your league, I'm never one to draft a trade, but he's one of those type of guys that if he does get on the field come week 1, and as Heath alluded to, maybe by the middle of the season he's running the same level and DeAndre Hopkins still manages to stay on the team, there's going to be a pretty good asset that you can hopefully flip for something that can help you in someplace else.
And Jamie said those 4 names: Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith, Aaron Rodgers. Those are the 4 guys I have immediately behind Kyler and Richardson. And I would say in a 2 quarterback league, I'd take all those guys before Kyler and Richardson. But in 1 QB, the upside, I'll just go ahead and take the other guys.